right, cool. Well, we might kick this thing off. I just want to let everyone know I'll be recording this webinar, so you will be able to view it in post. I'm going to post it up on YouTube and chuck it on LinkedIn afterwards. So we'll kick this thing off. I appreciate you guys joining the webinar. I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Chris Harding from AVAD Distribution. We're a wholesale distributor here in Queensland and with warehouses in Victoria as well. I mainly look after system design, technical support and training, mainly on the audio range. But today I'm showing you essentially how really an audio guy can manage a large AV-over-IP system. So with Netgear AV line switches, it's very easy to integrate into your applications. So today I'm joined by Alex and Carla from Netgear. We are going to be discussing the range and how we integrate it and deploy it into AV applications. So, yep, just another thing. We will do a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions, we'll throw it over to you guys in the chat, and then Alex, Carla, and I will hopefully answer those questions. All right, cool. So we'll just do a bit of a run through today. Essentially, we'll keep it, we don't want death by PowerPoint, we'll keep this nice and concise. So we're going to introduce AV-over-IP, what is it? Why Netgear? The AV line range, we'll briefly touch on that. We'll throw over to Alex to do a bit of a GUI demo. And then we'll touch on some solutions and applications and where we at AVAD Distribution integrate the Netgear switches into our solutions to help our customers maintain, stable AV applications. And then, yeah, we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. All right, cool. So, protocols, Ethernet. Everything is down an Ethernet cable these days. So many protocols and applications are bridging the gap between IT and AV. We've got NDI, for example, SDVoE, Dante protocol, and then Kramer have their AV line, their AV over IP hardware. So we use a lot of these protocols in the systems we design now. So pretty much you can distribute your hardware, link everything together on a network, and program up your systems completely with Ethernet. So it's a big game changer, and it's changed very rapidly over the last five years. So, but why AV over IP? So really the main points, at the end of the day, you've got less hardware and less cabling. You remove your physical point-to-point topology. So it means you can distribute your hardware around a venue or around a campus or a building, but centrally manage the flow. So Netgear is the core part of our system design here. When we talk about pushing those protocols and connecting our hardware together to create our audio visual systems. So, it opens up the system design possibilities. And that's why now everything is moving down that Ethernet connected system. So obviously Dante's been around for a bit, NDI has been around for a bit, and they're all being used, and they're all being used more often now that we find that people are integrating them into their systems just because it is easier. It's easier to connect, it's easier to troubleshoot, it's easier to design. So we're going to compare. So in previous system designs, we would use HD-base-T. Now HD-base-T has its place. It's obviously, it has a price point there where it, becomes cost competitive. But once you step over that point, it starts to become more expensive. And that's where AV over IP comes in. So usually when we quote, we do a comparison between HD-base-T and AV over IP, for example. So HD-base-T sends our content. It sends our content into transmitters and then maybe into a switcher and then maybe into a processor, converts it back into a transmitter to send down CAT to go to our receivers, to go to our displays, for example. So with AVoverIP, this is an SDVoE example. We've got our source material, but then it just goes into the transmitter, which transmit it into the protocols we need, and then into our Ethernet switch. So everything connects into the same network. But that's not exclusive. Obviously, you can bring your hardware in, bring your sources into a network and separate your VLANs and separate your control, your video, your audio. And that's the beauty of Netgear and why it makes it so easy to manage your systems. So this is a AVoverIP Kramer example. Again, the central point is our network. So we can manage our audio and video transport through a single unit. And this single unit here is our Netgear AV line switches. So essentially it's all about simplified workflows. So this section right in here, this is our Netgear switch. This is where we centrally manage. So essentially the topography of the system is source into the network, encoded into the network, decoded out of the network. So we can actually control our system from a central point, which just makes it really easy. So we don't have multiple devices to log into and sort of manage those flows. So now that's a bit of a brief overview of the essentially why we use Netgear and AVoverIP, and it is heading that way more and more as we see in our system designs and tenders that we assist people with. So yeah, I might throw over to Alex now if he wants to jump in and do a bit of a GUI demo, and we'll just show you how easy it is to set up the range, the line, and yeah, I'll hand over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Chris. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm here in our Netgear Pro AV Experience Lab. We're going to be looking at one of my lab switches. I have a 16XF. I know I told Chris I was going to go ahead and do a Netgear 10G2F, but I think it would be better if we utilize the 16XF as I just plugged that one in. This one right here is also on the latest firmware, which I think is good for this demonstration since we're all up to date. But this is our 16 fiber, 10 gig fiber switch. It's part of our what we call low port count, which is 16 ports and below, or wave 1. You can see in this GUI here, all of the fiber ports are listed at the top. You can hover on each one and kind of get some detailed information. Obviously, there's no power usage with the fiber switch, but you'd be able to see LLDP information of the endpoint or VLAN information. Also the rate in megabit per second, which is a good idea to kind of just quickly see if an endpoint is transmitting. Also, you get a legend of all of the different GUI items that we will add, such as this S here. It stands for 10 gig SFP plus port. So each one of these 16 ports is 10 gig SFP plus. And then you get your device details down here in the center area, where you can see uptime, serial number for registration purposes. We have out-of-band and in-band management. So if you plug in a DHCP server to the out-of-band management, it'll get an IP address, and you can manage this without affecting the in-band traffic. It's probably our most common. If you don't plug a DHCP server into it, then you can plug in, or you can use the default IP, which is a standard IP address that is also located in the manual that you can access the switch. And you just put yourself in the same subnet, you can get into it. But also we have DHCP capable on the management IP address, and I'll get into that once we look at the profiles. And then we have neutral mode, which is the standard SDP network redundancy. Once you get past that, once we configure profiles, they'll all show up here in the overview screen, so you can quickly see what protocols are configured on the switch. And then you get your CPU utilization and memory utilization. And this is actually the first switch line, the M4250 switch line, the AV switch line that Netgear has released. It's the only one that has a fan control. We did this so that, you know, you could put it in a conference room, you know, quiet areas that you can't really have a fan. If you hit the cool button here, it's gonna kick those fans up pretty high. That's more, you know, data center, or if you could hear it now, just kicked on right now. So really loud, but that's for like if it was in the rack or, you know, in a closet, a MDF or IDF or something like that. But if you keep it on quiet, what's going to happen is it keeps a nice, even, cool flow through the switch, even in PoE conditions. We have most all of the M4250s in this line are PoE plus and PoE plus plus capable. The only ones that are not is the switch that we're looking at here, and then we also have a 2.5 gig per port switch in that same line. But yeah, the fan controls are really helpful. You can turn it all the way off, but there are sensors that will kick on if needed to cool down the switch, but they will be automatic at that point. If you keep it on quiet, it'll keep it nice and cool all throughout. All right, so let's look at configuring a profile. So once we jump into the next option here on the left, this network profiles, you again see the switch in the center. Right now we have auto trunk on, which if I were to connect one of these ports to another M4250 switch, what's going to happen is we're going to negotiate that link. Once we negotiate that link, we're going to apply a hash that is proprietary to our Netgear switches. And if we confirm the other link is actually a Netgear switch, we'll go ahead and trunk that link, which means we'll auto forward any VLANs on switch A to switch B in that instance automatically. So no configuration required for that. Also, we have our PTP enabled by default right here, which is our PTP v2 transparent clock mode. It doesn't necessarily allow for scale up to like 5,000 plus devices, but these systems are not really set up for that level. But they are, you know, you could get several thousand if you wanted to, if you could build that network of PTP v2 devices just with the transparent clock mode. So down here is, again, the configured profile look, but we only have the default one data for right now. We'll go ahead and configure one in just a moment. But as you can see, some of these names will start to make sense. AES67, Dante, QSYS. We have a lighting profile, which is for our SACN, it's ArtNet and ManNet. These are all curated. We've worked with manufacturers. We have over 100 plus partners that we've talked to. Part of my job and the global team that I'm a part of go through interoperability testing in this lab and in labs around the world to make sure that all of these profiles are set up in a way that will work successfully. As you can see, we have the 2 NDI profiles, and in some cases, we've had cameras where they were NDI HX only, and this profile right here was the solution for it because it adds flow control, adds some other things that are specific to that. And this one right here, NDI5, this is the profile that we worked with at Newtek's engineer in Italy to kind of go through the motions of what is going to be needed when you're running at kind of the NDI5 and hybrid network. So yeah, and all of those things are in that specific profile. So let's go ahead and select an NDI5 profile. If you want to configure it, you click on this little gear to the right. This will bring up a page. Now, the first thing to do, we need to select the ports we want. So I'll just select ports 4, 5, and 6. Now, there's also a second option here. You can hit T, and that'll tag that port, meaning it'll preserve the VLAN as it leaves that port. Or you could just leave it green, which makes it an access port, which will remove the VLAN tag, which most endpoints you want it to relieve the tag. We'll give it a name, NDI5 video. Something like that. We'll give it a VLAN 50, and let's give it a nice rich like blue color. All right, and as you can see, as I did that, I clicked this little button and I went down to the color, but I also have to click into the color space to pick the one that I want. Then you click OK, it'll bring that color in. Now right now I could hit apply and I would have a nice, easy to use, ready to go layer 2 VLAN. Okay, it'd be perfect, ready to rock. But if you want to have a layer 3 VLAN, you want to add that VLAN interface as a gateway or IP address and maybe possibly a DHCP server, we have a slider right here that'll allow you to click that over. Then you can set a static IP. Let's just go 192.168.50.1. Auto populates the subnet mask down here. And then we'll see DHCP server. So let's set that up. Drop this down. It already pre-populates all of the items for me. I set up my lease time. This VLAN will not need to get on the internet, so I don't need a DNS server or search domain. So right now we have a layer 3 VLAN nice blue color. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply on that. Now, I'll always get this warning if I don't configure a DNS server, just letting me know that I can't make it out or resolve DNS names on the internet. Go ahead and hit save. Now, what's happening in the back end are all the configurations that'll make NDI work successfully with Dante, the prioritization that Dante requires, and all of the MTU size changes that are relevant for NDI5. All of that just took place for these 3 ports, and now we have our configured profile. So all we need to do now is start connecting those devices. So that's a really big benefit. Now, these profiles are not changeable or amendable. They're static, but you can go ahead and come over here and create your own profile if you so choose. You can enable multicast. You can give specific quality of services, but I'd like you to try our current profile templates. I think you'll find that we got it covered, but just in case, you can create your own. This next link down here, it's called link aggregation. This is allowing you to bond multiple ports. So if I were to connect to another switch, 14, 15, then what will kick in is an auto lag feature. Basically, we'll create a new interface down here, a lag group, and it'll bond those 2 ports to act as one interface. Now, while that's a great thing, it also utilizes the default multicast hash, which is destination MAC. You can also create one manually if you want as well, make it a static lag if you choose. All that's in this interface. If you wanted to see your multicast clients, you'll be able to see them in the multicast section. They'll all be displayed out here in the forwarding port that is connected, the VLAN that they're connected, the subscriber's IP address and MAC address, and then the multicast address and MAC address that they're listening to. You can also utilize this screen to block multicast. We've seen a few times that network hardware out there has, the networking that some of these companies have encountered, they've had to come up with workarounds. One of the workarounds in some cases was to put what they call multicast router advertisement upstream to the switch. Well, a switch, if it receives an advertisement from a multicast router, it will flood that multicast router with all multicast. So that would be a bad thing for, say, a 100 meg port, right? So yeah, in some cases, you might want to block all multicast going out to a control device of some sort. And this is where you can do that on this screen. Awesome. So if we keep on moving now, one of my favorite parts of these switches, and I think of the industry, is a lot of partners that we've worked with are starting to come around with a process called LLDP, which stands for Link Layer Discovery Protocol. It's a single hop, just what is connected to that port information dump. And we pull the port, we pull the host, the MAC address, the IP address, and also the port we're connected on the other side. It could be, Ethernet 1 or something like that on some of these endpoints, but it might also be another switch. So it might be another port on that switch. So it's a good way to just quickly see what's connected to the switch on what port. In the port configuration screen, this is a pretty standard screen that we have in all of our switches. You can see the description if it's there, the media type with 1 gig, 10 gig, what have you, the physical status, if it's connected or not connected, down, up, whatever. You can see the frame size here, if flow control is enabled. As you can see on our change here for the NDI5, we don't have the need to add flow control as you do with NDI4, and we changed the MTU from 9198 down to 1500. One of the many fixes that we added to that. So you can just see that that's all of the kind of the port details that you would want to look at. If we went down to security, security is a specific one for 802.1x. I do know that a lot of manufacturers are starting to kind of adopt this as like a way to authenticate devices to the network. It's not probably the top, or if you were to say the most absolute, like zero trust systems. If you've ever heard of zero trust, that's like an authentication at every hop in the network. That's not good for AV. It's going to take a lot of time for a lot of those things, and the AV network needs to flow. It needs to be a nice open network that can flow. So isolation really is probably the best way of security. But in case you wanted to have some kind of remote port authentication and then, you know, take unauthenticated members and send them to another location, you can do it from this screen. In our maintenance tab, this is where you can update the firmware. Now, all of our managed switches, M4250s, 4300s, and 4500s, all have 2 images. This way you can install into the inactive image location if you have a good working image to prevent issues during the installation. If you have an issue, you can just revert back to the old image and try again, no problem. You can also download the configuration, which I know is a big one for a lot of people. You want to make sure you have a downloaded configuration saved so that, you know, if you wanted to restore it or maybe even add it to a different switch, maybe you're trying to replicate your setup, there's something that you can do there. And if you need to start over, you can factory default the switch in this location as well. I'm not sure how familiar some of you are with AVB, but we do have an AVB implementation on this switch. You have to activate it through a license. And when you do activate it through a license, it will enable a network profile somewhere down around in here that will be audio with AVB. We do have an AVB with Viant video profile that will kind of modify the timers a little bit so that the negotiation's a little bit more concise, and it leaves a little bit extra wiggle room for the attributes to be filled. So that'll probably be happening, and that'll be also enableable through the AVB license. But right now we just have the audio AVB profile that'll pop up in between Dante and AES67 in there. All right. So yeah, so that's how that goes. Also, 2 modes, by the way, for the AVB activation. You'll have online license activation, then offline. If you do online, you can just quickly add the key and then you're done. If you do offline, you'll need to register the device at our my.netgear.com and then and get a code and then enter that code in there. Okay. In diagnostics, we have an entire group of pretty common ways of troubleshooting or grabbing data from the switch. Obviously, we have the logs. That's pretty important. You can take a look really quickly at what's going on. If you are experiencing something, you can also increase the level of the logging here. You can also do console logging if you handle it, or command logging, so which will show every command that's being entered in the switch. You can also see the port statistics. This will show you inbound, outbound, multicast packets. It's always good to see kind of stuff like that. And then you also, inbound will show you the RX errors. And if you scroll all the way down, you'll see the outbound as well. This will be your transmission errors. Inbound is coming to the switch and outbound is going out of the switch. And so that's really helpful. Port counters are really helpful for watching, especially AV devices that are using multicast. Seeing those numbers go up is a good way to see it. And also seeing no drops is also a really good thing. There's ping, traceroute, and DNS lookup in different areas. You also have a cable test. Now, you wouldn't be able to run a cable test on this specific switch, but if it was a copper port switch, you would have the capability of doing the port test. You can't do a cable test on a fiber cable, and unless you have special equipment or, you know, a guy that does fiber for a living. Port mirroring. Port mirroring is very helpful. It'll take whatever's happening on one port and then flash it over to another port and allow you to see what is happening on that port. It makes the receiver port, or the pro port we call it, an unusable port. So you gotta keep that in mind. If my port is source 3 and I want to see what is happening on port 3 from port 8, I no longer have the functionality of port 8. That's the only drawback. But you will be able to determine what kind of packets port 3 is receiving based on this capability. And it's pretty standard around the world. Excuse me. Oh, almost sneezed there. Okay, so terminal, as you can see, brings up this terminal window and takes you into the back end. So you can authenticate in here. I don't know how that, yeah, maybe make it a little bit bigger for you guys to see. All right, so this is the command line, CLI, and you can get right to it directly from the interface when you utilize the terminal. So you can see we added our IGMP Plus enhancement. We named the video. We created the VLAN. All of this was done when we initialized that and that added profile for NDI. As you can see, the class of service is set up for Dante. We've got LLDP, no LLDP med on a lot of these items. So we've disabled a lot of that chatter communication, all in the same profile edited location. So, all right, last but not least at all, if you do have any problems and you would like any of us at Netgear to help you with your AV installation in any capacity, you can always email us at at design@netgear.com. ProAVdesign@netgear.com. That'll reach me and the global team. We are fielding calls. We tend to have like a 2-hour communication turnaround time. We try to stay on top as many as we can to help us out in that case. This screen right here, this diagnostic screen, the tech support file is critical. This will give us a real quick snapshot of everything that's been configured and kind of like what the device is experiencing. And it's just a text document. So essentially it comes out like this. And you can see that in the, if I get this to move over just a little bit. All right, there we go. So you can see it gives you just a quick snapshot of what it is. So here's the switch, the serial number, you know, the time, current time the switch is, the firmware information right here. But it's a big file. I mean, it's huge. But it also, you can Control F and run around, you know, if you wanted to, come down to here. This is the entire configuration I just showed you, the show running configuration. All that is listed there. We can also see IGMP related data, such as IGMP snooping if it's enabled, stuff like that. So you can really gather a lot of data from that information just from a little click of the button. And it's really critical for me and my team to have that just to get started on the issue. Of course, a detail of the symptom, of course, but I can tell you, different from our competitors, we will be helping you resolve whatever you experience in the field. Our goal is to just provide an innovative solution and to make your installations and your setups out there go really, really smoothly. I think that's the, two more things. Sorry, Chris, 2 more things.
All good.
So at the top here, you can reboot the switch. You can also go, we have the other UI, which sometimes you might want to take a look at. It has some other items in. You can quickly go to it that way. And then also, you always want, any configuration you make, you always want to save. The thing about a managed switch is it has a current running config and then it has a startup config. And you want to save what you've done in the running to the startup config. Now, there's some questions on why that was the case last time I did a webinar. Well, the reason for that is primarily if you were to configure yourself out of the switch, say like you configured a VLAN and you no longer had access to the switch all of a sudden, in order to access the switch, you could just reboot it and you would be back to where you started. So it gives you that flexibility of not permanently damaging or bricking the switch or putting yourself out of the switch. It gives you some flexibility in that. So that's where that comes in. All right, sorry about that, Chris. So I hope that was a pretty good demo.
That was great. Thank you very much. No, not a problem at all. I really appreciate it. I'll quickly jump back into the presentation and we'll continue on. And I just wanted to sort of show some of the applications we use the switches in. So it's great that you can set up your different profiles based on your hardware and can completely control your AV system through a central point. That's what makes life easy, especially as AV systems become more integrated on the network. So quickly, let's go. Okay, cool. So let's talk scenarios. So some of the systems we come across, video over IP example here, we might have a bunch of commercial displays, projectors, and a control system in our sources. So we can bring them all through the network, through the switches. We can obviously profile them and set them up so they obviously flow as clean as possible. So, you know, something like pubs, clubs, hospitality, digital signage, integrates into classrooms and boardrooms, even corporate AV and streaming as well. So it all circles around our central point. We do a lot of audio system design with Yamaha. We integrate a lot into the network now. We got PoE powered controllers up here in the MCP1. We run our MRX7 DSP, which is a multi-zone processor. We can integrate Ordinate Dante adapters. We've got our paging mic here. Just make sure you can see my screen okay. Is that, or have I got a blank screen?
I can see it.
Yep, okay, cool.
I can see it okay.
Yep, okay, cool. Just had a little pop up there. Okay, so our networked amplifiers as well. So what's great in this scenario is if you're doing a distributed bell paging system, you can link your amplifiers around a school and drive your speakers off the amplifiers locally. So you can connect them all via Dante protocol into our switch. We can distribute those switches if need be around the campus, and we can all put them on our own controlled VLAN. We can have our controllers as well integrate into our network. So it just makes the connection side of system design so much easier. So now we're seeing more and more conferencing applications. I think COVID really kicked this along, where essentially we're integrating, we need a lot more high fidelity and clarity in our audio conferencing applications. So a lot of brands have brought on specific hardware that uses the Dante protocol to bring it in. So ceiling microphones, we got PoE table mics, PoE speakers now coming online, and our conferencing codec. So Yamaha, we do a lot of with the Ardesia range, very powerful, very smart, all-encompassing video conferencing on the audio side. Okay, so broadcast and streaming, obviously we've seen a lot of that sort of take off as well. You know, obviously COVID really helped that along, but it's great to see more people putting content out. So this example is an NDI example. So we might have distributed cameras around a venue. We've got our control monitor so we can see what's happening. We might have our streaming and broadcasting unit, the TriCaster here, and then a switcher, all integrated into the switch, all profiled, all easily connected. So that's the beauty of the system design here. Cool. So essentially, this is an old graphic I found, but essentially, yeah, it just explains our central point. So we just bring everything in, and then as Alex explained and demoed, we can easily set our profiles up. We can easily control our network to essentially create a stable audio-visual system. So our point of failure is minimal in AVoverIP because we don't have all this other extra hardware. And so I prefer to have a centrally managed port where I can control my systems and design them and see what's happening, and obviously for troubleshooting as well. Cool. So yeah, some of the brands that we utilize here at AVA with Netgear, we use the Ordinate Dante protocol a lot. Obviously, they have a bunch of adapters which enable you to run 2 in, 2 out, or single in, single out audio adapters to distribute on the network. So you know, we're finding more and more people are uptaking this particular design methodology because it's just so easy to implement. We're a big Kramer house, so we do a lot of control systems where we integrate in control over some of the other products that we distribute, such as Panasonic PTZ cameras and displays and projectors, and Yamaha commercial audio. So we're really Netgear really brings it all together. So we're very excited to have Netgear on board, just distributing that product and helping our resellers design systems efficiently, and essentially it does save you time, which saves you money. Cool. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much for attending. Obviously, keep this one brief and easy. And so yeah, I just wanted to see in the chat if you had any questions there. We do have a question here. with this range, will it allow VLANs for Dante, NDI, PC network on the one switch?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan. We worked with the new tech engineers in Italy. They had a lot of problems with NDI4, specifically because the way NDI4 kind of does its push, its TCP unicast push. It's kind of rough around the edges as far as Dante goes. So when you'd have both on the same network, you'd have a lot of issues. But in NDI5, along with our capability of queuing the specific timing queues and expedited forwarding queues that Dante require, and changing the MTU, we were able to find a nice balance.
I also just wanted to ask a question, obviously, as well. So as we get on to port count and we start to increase our ports, obviously with the trunking, is there any specific setup we need to use when we trunk between our switches?
No, and it's only going to get better when we come out with our controller. We actually have an AV controller that we've been in the development of it for about 1.5 years. We're really close to getting to a beta that will be starting. We're actually going to announce at the US show Infocom, and we'll announce it there, and then we'll have a beta. And anyone's available to come into the beta if they have our switches, they want to participate in the beta, they can join it. Just send us a name at ProAV Design that you want to join, and we can add you. But we'll also bring that experience, that AV experience that I showed today, to all of our switches, managed switch line over time. So the M4300s, also the M4500s. And you'll have even easier setups. You'll be able to configure all your profiles on one switch and then connect all of the switches together. And then using the controller, you'll take all the profiles and be able to put them all on all the switches without actually having to go to those switches. So yeah, that's like the holy grail essentially that we're trying to get to, is to have this really easy setup and just continue to innovate and iterate on it.
I did have another quick one that I thought of. So when I design my profiles and put my ports together, will it spit out a connection list based on, like, so I can take it to site and plug in all?
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah. Like we have a few phases. That's not going to be phase 1 or 1.5, they're now calling it. Phase 1 will be being able to migrate the profiles. You'll still need to go in and select your ports individually. The one thing that you'll have in phase 2 is now you'll have a configuration pane that allow you to select multiple ports in the controller, and then you'll have in the end phase, like the goal we're trying to get to is to be able to build a network without even having the switches, and then take that file, take it to a location, authenticate to that file, and then deploy to all of your switches that you have connected there. So you'll have your topology design, you follow the topology design, then you'll have your configuration design file that you'll just be able to push your configuration to it.
I've had another question about the controller you mentioned. Is the controller bringing redundancy to NDI, etc., similar Dante with primary and secondary?
That's interesting. I don't think we'll have that as something that we would have right away. I haven't seen anything related to that from New Tech or from my manager, who's the product line manager for all these switches. I haven't seen any conversation like that, but I'll take that action and follow up with them and see if that's something that we're looking to do.
Cool.
Good question.
Yeah. Cool. I'll see if there's any more questions. Otherwise, yeah, we'll wrap this thing up, and hopefully you don't have to stick around too late in the office, Alex.
Well, we gotta get these boxes out of here. So let's see.
Yeah, well, it's still morning.
I got like 3 or 4 piles to get through. So once I get through 3, I'll probably come back and do the last one. Last one's the big. It's actually over there. So
yeah, I'm off to go get my second coffee for the day. So I appreciate.
Boot time can range between. So typically, it depends on the load on the switch, load on the CPU, and everything, but it should be within about 135 seconds by, I would say, average. But then there is a possibility that if it has to write and it has to do a very meticulous write of the configuration file, or if we change the way something is done, we did do a modification for 802.1x. We went to a higher SHA level, so we were like SHA-1. We went to SHA-256. That change right there caused the boot time to go higher because you have to calculate a new hash, and that is a much bigger hash. So the CPU had to do that on boot, on the initial boot. So yeah, it should be around 135 seconds to somewhere in that range, average.
Cool. I'll leave the floor open a little bit more. You can ask more questions. That's fine.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah.
You want to give me a second, and you want me to show you the new little guy?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this right here, I don't know how well the light's going to show it. This is our new behind the fanless design. It's not out yet. It's in fact, this model is just a hardware piece. There's really no software. I mean, there is, but it's not usable. But it is the M4250, we call them desktop units, the 9G1F. So it has 9 1 gigabit ports, and then it has a 10 gig, or not 10 gig, 1 gig fiber SFP port on the end here. And it has these little wings that will screw into the sides, so it can like mount flat to the back of a monitor, right? And be able to support it. And it's a fully managed layer 3 switch, just like every other M4250 we have, but super quiet, fanless design. So it's coming out in the next few months.
I'd just like to reiterate to everyone who's joined today, obviously, if you're registered with us, I'll get you a price list, obviously, on the Netgear switches. And yeah, if you have any questions, obviously tunnel them through myself or through the Pro Design email there as well. If you want to mention that one again, Alex.
Yeah, proavdesign@netgear.com. We'll reach our global Pro AV engineering services group. Just basically all of the managed switch AV minds at Netgear that have been working and testing with this equipment for the last 3 years. Saw another question come in too.
Yep.
Controller, will there be? Oh yeah, sure. I mean, the goal eventually will be that. It won't be in the first iterations because we want to make the local management as easy, sound, and usable as possible. Netgear's had remote management. I've been at Netgear for 10 years. I used to work with our ReadyNAS products. We used to have ReadyNAS remotes, and then we had Arlo, which was a big camera security system that was also remote management. Had this big video distribution servers, and Netgear's always had some kind of remote management capability. They purchased a company called Leaf Networks a long time ago. They still own all that technology, so we can implement something like that fairly easy. We utilize we have a software type called Insight currently, which is our business cloud implementation. Think Ubiquity Unify alternative, if you will, and it works pretty well. I mean, it's definitely a good alternative. It's got a lot more support, and I think in the last iterations of it's been pretty functional. So we might look to take the controller that way, but we also want to make sure we've drilled in and nailed the experience first, and that what we would do remote management wise will match the experience that you have with the current AVUI and AVUI controller.
That's great. Exciting things on the way.
Yeah, we'll always innovate. That's the thing about Netgear, is once we find one item that we can innovate on, it's expanding that and iterating on that so that Netgear becomes a preferred choice. And I think we've done a really great job with a lot of things. Like we mentioned one IGMP Plus enhancement that's been really a fundamental piece of the AV networking. the AV UI, as I showed you today, you can see how easy it is to configure and all of the different things that we've been doing internally to make sure that it's easy to configure, that it works. Those are just small but yet good tweaks to add to this industry to make your lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, myself, it's been so much easier to be able to do the IT side of things, where the AV IT has come across, because I'm from an audio background. So essentially my IT has, I wasn't trained particularly in that space. So having this product there and having the ease of use and the certainty to know my system's going to be done correctly. Yeah, that's the whole kit and caboodle right there, which really helps. Right. So yeah, no, just want to see if there's any more quick questions, and we'll. Cool. So yeah, obviously, this one is being recorded, so we'll chuck this back up on the AVAD YouTube there. We'll chuck it on LinkedIn as well. So I really appreciate everyone joining in today. I want to thank Alex and Carla from Netgear. And yeah, we'll hopefully see you on the next one. So like I said, any questions, hit myself up, and yeah, hope to get some Netgear into your jobs soon.
Privilege, Chris. Thanks.
Cool. All right, thanks again, everyone.